Good morning, and welcome to the Steps to Soul podcast. Today, I'm Brandon Bourgeois. This is Christopher Sater, and we're going to talk about what buyers are really looking for. Specifically, kind of the state of the market in 2025. What businesses are popular to them, which are not. Kind of what today's buyers want in deal structure, due diligence, and post-close transition requirements, etc. It's a busy changing field. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Probably one of the more interesting topics we've done in a while because it's going to, I think, be more digestible and relatable to people listening. This is one that's going to kind of show what the trend has shifted from years past to current state and also address some of the current climate changes. You know, we talked about the SBA being partially on hold with the government shutdown, interest rates, industry swings, a lot of AI talk today as well. The industry is really changing in buyer age, sophistication, resources. It's a whole different playing field than what it was 13 years ago when I got started. And I know even for you, a little after me. In the last 2 years, it's really kind of morphed into a different animal. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, kind of give some people some pointers to sellers. This is great for you. You're going to know kind of what to expect. And if buyers, you're out there and you're just starting the journey or you're in the journey, we've got some great tips, tricks, just kind of insights of what's going on and what to expect and how it's all going to interrelate to your journey of acquiring a good business to purchase. Let's be honest. At the end of the day, it only matters if you get it done, right, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. And I'd say what buyers are really looking for. Most owners think buyers are only chasing profits, right? Because that's kind of the topic of discussion that comes up pretty quick, and buyers and sellers start talking, or they reach out to us. But I think what I've seen over the past year, 2 years, is what they're really chasing is peace of mind. They want the problem is too many sellers focus on getting top dollar. And they're overlooking the real driver of what's driving buyers to come take a look at their business, which is confidence. And when I say confidence,
Yes.
I mean buyers pay premiums for businesses that feel predictable. They feel like repeatable business. Hey, if I buy this business, I'm going to be able to take it over. We're going to use that word again, transfer to me, transferability. My solution to helping owners or helping sellers build that buyer confidence comes months before we go through listing, right? It's building those clean records that we're always talking about, process documentation, stable cash flow. So it is a little bit about profit, but it's about the stability of that cash flow.
Absolutely. So all the points we've mentioned before in previous episodes, but we're going to kind of condense them to the 30,000 foot level. Now let's drop it down to 10,000 feet. So let's get some granular details to go with that, because I know we've talked a lot about big picture concepts and some nitty gritty, but let's really dive into what's going on and what's hot in the market and what's not, and how all that applies, what you just said, to what we're seeing. First off, let's just address the obvious. The silver tsunami is coming, and I think every buyer has heard you got to buy a trade or service business, right? HVAC, plumbing, electrical, you name it, we know it's there. But I think some people are not looking closely at is there's also been a very big surge in healthcare support, healthcare industries, and B2B recurring revenue models. Let's talk about like one that you've seen a lot of surge in is accounting and HR. Why is that? With AI now, buyers see ability to scale with remote work. You can now buy smaller firms, roll them up very quickly for a very affordable price and sell them for a large multiple. These models, although require some specific skill set, with AI now being able to analyze and help organize let's just talk about the internet. Google Sheets, Google Docs, the ability to send information and receive Dropbox. That is catching up with a younger buyer base, which is the next point I'm going to make, that's entering the market. They've realized, having to go through the COVID era of working from home or working remote, I can scale this. I can manage things remotely. I can hire a VA in the Philippines, a virtual assistant, for those who don't know what that is, for pennies on the dollar, have them work overnight while I sleep, organize. I come in and I can expand dramatically. A great example of this, I see a lot of young accountants starting Q of E firms and doing a large amount of volume just with VAs and other people, either domestic or internationally based, because they can scale with AI, and they're buying other small accounting firms to add those businesses into their portfolio. I don't think I would have said that 5-6 years ago, but that is another trend where, yes, the service industry is always going to be hot, HVAC, electrical, but let's talk a little bit, Chris, about what buyers really like. And what's hot is they love scalability right now. And can it be digital, right? I mean, that is, I think, going to be the biggest driver. Besides the nitty-gritty skills you can't put a machine on to do, like fixing your heater or digging in the ground for your plumbing line, that AI and the digital transformation that's here is changing buyer perception, is it not? And what they really want to buy.
Yeah, what you talked about what's hot, and I completely agree with you. What I would say is not hot right now that I'm not getting much interest on my listings is single location retail,
Yes.
owner dependent restaurants, businesses without scalable systems. I'm not seeing much interest in those. If you're just kind of a
Mm-hmm.
one and done kind of business, you have to do a sale and each sale has to be new. I'm not seeing a lot of interest in those types of business because it's just like you said, it's too hard to scale them. There has to be a solution in those types of businesses. And what I always tell owners that are in those businesses that are thinking about listing in the next couple of years, it's time to pivot. And what I mean by that is you got to position your business just like the ones
Mm-hmm.
that buyers want, build that recurring contract. We've done this before where we talk to lawn care companies. We've seen good ones and bad ones. I'm not saying any of them are bad, but the ones that aren't going to sell are because they're going out and they're doing one job, and then maybe the customer calls them
Mm-hmm.
next week, or they've got something where they're going to go on a schedule, but there's no contract in place. So those lawn companies, this is just an example, but you can start doing that. You can say, hey, we need to sign you up on a year contract, and maybe it's an easy out for the homeowner if you do a bad job. You're not trying to knock them down into you
Yeah.
just doing, but get those contracts in place, and that way when buyers come in, they say, oh, we've
Mm-hmm.
got dependable revenue, and that helps systematize your business. From that perspective, what have you seen, Brandon, that same shift towards stability and excitement in the marketplace? Have you seen that as far as the restaurants that you've listed and those single retail operations?
Yes. We still got some activity. We got an LOI this morning for a restaurant that we have. So they're not dead. Let's make that
Yeah,
clear. They're not
no,
like never going to
not
survive.
dead. No.
But the buyer base is more limited what it's been. And you talked about scalability. If you own a restaurant, we talked about this in the service industry podcast a while back. If you only have 2,000 square feet, you're maxed out how many tables and chairs you can flip in a certain day in that facility. So you said you want to bring outside value. How do you do that? Do you start doing catering? You start doing more online advertising to draw people and to do drop off, to do pickup orders. You've got to add some different aspects to your business to help it be transferable, our favorite word. I mean, I don't know how often we're going to say it again and again to everybody listening. It's that important. Interdependency. Now, what's cooling off, not just industry wise, but trend wise, is you've got to get your books digitized. If you can't go to QuickBooks or some kind of accounting software and pull stuff quickly and integrate, buyers are going to move on to the next person. Because now, even our CRM can import directly from your QuickBooks into our CRM to do analyze work. Buyers are using AI, and if they can't get a digital version and they can't use that, or even sophisticated accounting firms to pull your books in and run models, they're not interested. It's not worth the headache to them. And that's not to mean your business is not good. But when there's a supply on the market, they're going to cherry pick the best ones with the best transferability. And it's not always about cash flow. One business might be making less than the other, but if it's an easy transfer, that's going to be more desirable than the $100,000 or $200,000 greater cash flow of the restaurant that's owner dependent with mediocre books. It doesn't mean it's a bad business. It just makes it harder. I want to mention this too. What I see a lot of, Chris, I think you see it too, but let's get our different opinions here situated. Buyers are no longer looking for $100,000, $200,000 cash flow businesses on average. More and more buyers are realizing if I can get a job at the state making 80, 90 grand, 60, 70 grand with benefits, right? Why take the risk of a liability of a $200,000, $300,000 business making the same money working 60 hours a week? They're realizing now with the SBA putting 10% equity injection down, if I got 200 grand, I can buy a $2 million business. That business is probably cash flowing $500,000 to $800,000, give or take on the industry. Would I rather roll the dice with all my cash to buy business making 100, 200 grand, or roll the cash I got for a business making 300 to 500, 800 grand in cash flow, right? And they're younger. The young generation is saying they see the silver tsunami coming. They see opportunity to grow and, like you said, make a lifestyle change to change the trajectory of their family. So if they're going to roll the dice on a big business or in a business of that size higher for Main Street, entering the lower middle market phase, they're going to buy something that's transferable, that's got scalability, and that has a chance to survive long term. Why would you roll your dice betting small money when you can roll your dice betting big money and get big return? And it's just about the same ROI you're going to get investing your money cash to cash return year in, year out. It's a no-brainer. And I see a lot of people leaving corporate world and young people saying, I worked 5 years in the corporate world. I'm ready to get out and start being my own owner. I'm going to make it work because I would much rather take the risk and make millions more in my lifetime than sit behind a desk the next 20 years and get left behind in the dust with AI coming to get rid of my job, right, Chris? Let's be honest. It's coming.
Yeah. No, I'm not seeing a whole lot of activity. Not that it's not dead, but anything under $200,000 cash flow, I'm not seeing tons and
Struggling.
tons of interest like I was maybe 5, 8 years ago. And the
Hmm.
reason being is that at 10% interest rate, you take $200,000 cash flow if that
With the
business,
SBA.
right? If that business is selling for a 3x, you can count $100,000 of that cash flow going to debt service. So now you've just bought this business, like you said, for X amount of dollars, and 100,000 is going to debt service for the next 10 years. So you've got $100,000 of profit, and we've
Hmm.
seen how quickly that can erode, especially on the transfer of business. And you got to have some ramp up
Just things
speed.
can happen.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest mistake sellers make is assuming buyers want growth when actually all they really want is security. They want to know that they're
Hmm.
buying your business and they're going to be able
Protections.
to, yeah, they're going to be able to make cash flow and they're going to be able to support their family and have that, and they're not going to have to go get a second job after they just bought a company. Or that's what I
Yeah,
see a lot.
you're absolutely right. So that kind of dives into like, let's talk about buyer psychology here. Let's talk about what they're really looking for. We kind of hit the nail on the head up, beat it around, but let's start with the obvious. And you just kind of made the best point. Predictable cash flow, recurring revenue, subscription-based revenue, good books, clean financials. Let's tie those two together, because when those two are correct, then you get what's next: transferability. When buyers, like I just mentioned, they're not going to want to buy a smaller business with weaker books. It doesn't mean somebody's not going to want to buy it, but the field is narrowing, and with the way current rates are, it is harder to sell. That's the problem we're facing. That is the nature of the business. That is the nature of the industry. Unfortunately, that it is what it is. And buyers look at a lifestyle to risk tolerance ratio, right, Chris? I met with a young man, a listener to the podcast. He was talking about he's looking to buy a business, cash on about 200. He said, I'm making that almost now. I realized after getting halfway through this deal on my own, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be doing the main job the guy's doing. I'm not buying this to quit my job to buy a job. If I'm going to quit my job that's paying me well, I'm quitting to own a company that generates a large return to me that I can administer, and I'm not out there digging stuff up in the ground myself. If that's the case, I could get a job doing that right now. I don't need to do that. So it's lifestyle risk tolerance. And I think owners often forget that. The buyer has a risk tolerance threshold. And the better you have predictable cash flow and clean financials and transferability, that buyer threshold is often more flexible. When it's not, it's going to do what, Chris? It's going to shrink and narrow. You can talk about brand reputation. You can talk about all those, Google reviews. We can go into all that nonsense. But the next biggest thing that buyers really want, we're going to say it again and again and again. Does it have scalability, and does it have AI survivability and adaptability? Has the owner even included AI into their processes now in their company? Is it an industry that AI is going to gut? We talk about graphic designers. Imagine being a graphic designing company right now, or a design company, where someone can go in the chat GPT and say, design, here's a picture of my house, design a modern contemporary look. Right, Chris? I mean, what are you selling now? A brand, a name maybe?
Yeah. Maybe a better way to do it, or some kind of something that chat GPT can't do, but you better adapt and get there quickly, right? You better
Mm-hmm.
have that add-on, or be that service that does something different than everybody else is going to be able to do, and that's another thing. Buyers don't want to have to come in, and they don't want to have to reinvent your business to make it work. I see that a
No.
lot. Is like I get
Mm-hmm.
potential clients, I'll call them, because sometimes they don't become clients, but they come to me and they're selling the business, and hey, if the buyer comes in and changes this and this and reduces that and this, they'll
It's going
make
to
it
be
work.
great.
Well, yeah,
Then
that
why
sounds
haven't you
great.
done it?
Yeah, exactly. And I had a business out of Colorado approach me, and they wanted to reduce payroll by $500,000, and they wanted to include that, and they would need it to, had this growth plan, and that's what they wanted to sell, and that buyers aren't going to buy that. There's no buyer. I haven't run
No.
into them yet. If I did, I'd probably sell them one of my businesses, because it's, hey, if you're willing to pay for something that hadn't been built yet, let's do a deal. But I think our approach is simple before taking a business to market is we help owners remove the uncertainty. So when your numbers tell a clean
Yes.
story, your business can run without you, even if you're still there. It still should be able to run without you. So even if you work 40 hours,
Absolutely.
yeah, you should be able to step back. I think it's that old, can you take a month off, or can you take 2 months off and your business survive? That kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Buyers are going to show more interest in those listings and those businesses, and so that's kind of where my thought process is when I'm looking at a business and looking at listing it, is those two things: can your business survive without you, and are your numbers clean?
You're right. So that leads to the next main point. do you have proprietary information, systems, and licenses in place that give you some other value, even if you're not perfectly optimized, as you just said? What brings value to that table? And buyers are getting more and more specific and looking for that because as the industry has evolved over the last 10, 15, 20 years, people aren't just looking for jobs. They're realizing that if I'm going to buy this company and take the risk, am I going to cap myself by buying this business? Am I going to limit by buying this single-use retail facility where I can't get any larger, right? Now, let's take it another direction. Our group sold a boutique in New Orleans for $650,000 2 weeks ago, women's boutique. The buyers are a younger couple. The owner was out of area, was having a child, had to unload was like, look, I just don't want to deal with this business from 3 hours away, yada, yada. The buyer said, look, I believe this can be a bigger e-commerce deal for this company. I know we've got inventory. I have the AI marketing skills and other outreach possibilities to transfer what my knowledge at my current W-2 to this. My wife's going to be there and run it, but I can do this. If I can increase volume 20% just from doing better on the e-commerce side, this becomes a really big ROI. So you've already got a great system in place, inventory knowledge. You've got a good business with a good reputation, good books, transferable, but there's still ability to scale there, right? You're not just up to your geographic footprint like we talked about. They have a way, they see a vision how to take it and bring it outside. So for those of you out there in that boutique same shoes, there's people out there that want to pay and do a good job for it. And we got it SBA funded. Let's just be clear though, if the other points you just mentioned above do not really align, that buyer's probably not going to show up and pay a good price for that business. And that's just the way it is. But it doesn't mean it's a death sentence either. By no means. Be proactive. If you haven't taken a step back right now and you're in that business, and this is a note to buyers too, look for businesses where this is still available. It hasn't been done yet because you can still get a better deal and a proper deal for what it's doing. So there's still even a greater ROI for you. So this is a two-way street here. It's not one hurts the other or vice versa. It's what makes sense for the business, what it's worth now, but what else can it be realistically, right, Chris? Not just, oh, well, if you change 5,000 things, it'll be great. No, we're not talking about that. That's unrealistic. Because all that leads to one major thing. And what is that next, Chris? The deal structure. We've talked about all the points buyers want. It's deal structure is now the next issue, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. One of the biggest frustrations sellers have is seeing great offers fall apart because of that structure, because of whatever structures. It's usually not the price. It's the structure, how much they're looking for in seller financing or earn-out. Buyers in today's market, they want deals that make sense for both sides. Usually that's going to include partial seller financing. I know a lot of sellers aren't open to that, but it usually includes even a small amount, 5%, 10%, especially if there's reason to. Customer concentration issues that we've talked about.
Licensing, etc.
Yeah. Well, a lot of what I've run into lately is working capital issues, having those clear.
Yes.
This is one thing that I would really preach on is sellers, business owners should know what their working capital is. If you don't, you need to figure that out before you go trying to sell your business because buyers are going to want that. They consider that part of the transferability. They want to know, hey, how much is your AR on an average monthly basis and how much is your AP? We can talk about this another day, kind of go into that granular detail. Right, but they want those well-defined times and well-defined timelines. The solution is always clarity and collaboration. Work with your CPA. Ask him if he knows what your working capital is. There's people that can tell you this, and that way you go into a deal, you're not surprised when the offer comes in and they say, I want your AR and your AP, and you're handing over another $200,000. If you know up front, you can work that into the deal. You can work that into the valuation, and that can be a part of the offering and the listing price. And I teach sellers that every strong deal has 3 traits: transparency that we always talk about, simplicity, and the one we don't talk about enough is flexibility. Be open to hearing different buyers. They're going to come in with different offers. If you got 3 offers for the same business, even if the price is somewhere around the same, the deal structure, which is the topic we're on, is going to look drastically different, whether it's an asset sale, stock sale, working capital is included, it's not included, cash-free, debt-free. All these terms are going to come into play, and your broker should give you a good idea of how that's going to look when these offers start coming in, so it's not the first time you've kind of understood the structure and what this could be.
You're exactly correct. And what you're going to see, too, coming out of all this with deal structure, let's talk a little about what buyers are going to expect to use to get these deals done. The SBA, you mentioned seller financing, but majority of the deals in the main street or even lower middle market lower side of it is going to be SBA funded. That means different requirements, guarantees. Now with the SBA SOP change back in June, how long an owner can stay on in transition, if owner equity injection is included, how long that can affect the term they have to hold their seller note, all those issues. And like you said, Chris, deal structure could differ wildly based on how that's used and how it's applied. But as an owner, you need to understand that the SBA is the single driving force for selling Main Street and lower middle market, especially smaller, lower middle market deals. So if your business can't fit that mold, you're going to severely hinder your buyer pool, because buyers have realized, especially younger buyers who are not as capitalized as maybe larger strategic buying groups or different, family offices and private equity groups, are going to rely on financing to do a deal to pay you the best price and to pay a price and even get the deal done in general, unless you want to sell or finance a massive portion. That being said, if you don't have all the things you talked about previously, you're not going to be able to get that deal done, and that's going to severely hurt your ability to sell your company and dictate what the buyer can also offer you because of the financing terms. Let's talk a little about another term that's become popular lately, Chris, is F reorgs. Talk a little bit about that, because you've dealt with that a little more than I have, and I think you've got some good experience to share with the group. And if you're a buyer and seller, listen carefully right here. This is a good part to listen.
Yeah, so past couple of deals, the buyer wanted to do an F reorg. That's just a simple tax restructuring that lets a buyer it gets the tax benefit of an asset deal, but it's a step up in the asset basis. So while you're still doing the deal as a stock purchase, it's often used when you're buying an S corp. It's letting both sides structure the sale efficiently without triggering that extra tax at the corporate level. So in short, it's a tax tool that makes stock deals more tax friendly for buyers. That's the gist of it.
Well put, because typically asset sales, it works out well because they get to redepreciate. But if you do a stock sale because of contracts, you don't always get the same benefits as a buyer, and it hinders your cash flow. So great points. And let's talk about the next issue, equity rollovers. That's becoming more and more and more prevalent, especially on the lower middle market side or higher level value Main Street businesses. Groups have come in and realized, I want to spend my capital, but I don't want to leverage it all. But if I do a partial equity rollover, it keeps you as the owner somewhat involved, right? A promise of rolling up everybody else and selling for a bigger price as a group, thus giving you a bigger ROI return. So as an owner, especially in the trade business or in a lower middle market business, expect that to be a part of your deal. So you're not going to get 100% cash at close. So you need to understand that. So say your value is $5 million, they may want to roll over 10% into rollover equity. That's $500,000 right there. So now you're looking at $4.5 million at close, not counting other expenses, taxes, etc. So keep those thoughts in mind. Those are deal structures that buyers are bringing to the table, especially more sophisticated buyers, and younger buyers too have realized these are options on the table. Before that, maybe weren't seen as common in the public. But let's be honest, with the evolution of the internet, social media, marketing, a lot of deal structure from higher level deals at much larger deals has worked its way down into the lower middle market and Main Street deals. It doesn't mean it always applies correctly. Let's make that clear. I was talking to my cousin who sold his company for $100 million. He was telling me how JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and very big, investment banks up in Wall Street are even trickling down to the lower middle market looking for opportunities. And they're bringing some of that deal structure. Doesn't always apply, but don't be surprised to see it. That's all we're talking about today. Just be aware of what the trend in the market is changing and what buyers and groups are bringing to the table. But likely for a private investor, you're not going to see that as an owner, equity rollover. Now for a strategic or a family office or a private equity group, that's much more likely. So we've kind of talked about deal structure. Let's talk now about the next phase in a deal, which what buyers are going to be wanting to have is due diligence, insights, and requirements, right, Chris? I think the most common and fastest changing aspect of that is requesting QOVs, quality of earnings reports. I rarely saw those 5 to 10 years ago. In the last year alone, I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there are now accounting firms just doing that. That is their whole basic business. And it's amazing how quick that has caught on to younger buyers who maybe don't have the analytical sophistication or years of experience looking at tax returns, able to read P&Ls and balance sheets correctly, to correctly calculate, like you said, the working capital or the cash needed on hand or other issues. These QOVs now are changing the game, and they are coming in very common on smaller and smaller and smaller deals. And lenders love it because it's basically another financial audit, but at the same time, it's another cost a buyer's going to incur, and it's also require more documentation production than what maybe sellers were used to 5 or 10 years ago, which means if you don't have your clean financials, you don't have them ready, and you can't move them digitally, you're going to really hinder yourself, right, Chris? Because those QV firms want to put everything into Excel sheets and run everything. And if you don't have it digital, guess what's going to happen? The QV is not going to get done, right?
Yeah, and I'd say the problem with Q of E's is that you're paying all this upfront money as a buyer,
Mm-hmm.
and the deal's not done. It's not even guaranteed yet. I ran into this just yesterday.
We were
Buyer
talking
paid
about
for a
that.
Q of E. Don't know how much he paid. It could have been 5,000. It could have been 40,000. I've seen numbers.
Could have been 60 in
You
some
know,
cases. Like
yeah,
it's a
yeah. I
lot of
don't think
money.
this one was. Yeah, I don't think this one was
Hopefully
that.
not, but we've seen that
it wasn't
happen though. We have.
Yeah, I have seen that happen. But the problem is the lender now just turned him down after he gave him a pre-approval letter, and we'll get the deal done. We'll
Mm-hmm.
find another lender. This deal is going to happen. It's too good not to. But
We already
this
got 4 phone calls
particular
done on that.
lender,
We're good.
yeah, even though this particular lender gave them a pre-approval and gave them their blessing up front, I think the credit department got a hold of the deal, probably because they weren't involved in the pre-approval up front. So now it goes back to them. One guy shut the whole deal down, and you've spent this, let's call it $10,000 probably for this Q of E. So that's why a lot of people don't do that. And you know, from a seller side, sellers don't. I don't think I've had a seller dread due diligence, but they're not looking forward to it. It's not going to be their favorite part of the deal. They're kind of, especially when they get that first list and see all the amount of items. The problem isn't due diligence itself. The problem is that sellers aren't ready for it. You know,
Yes, and it makes it harder on them.
buyers don't expect perfection, but they do want transparency. And when you can't even give them transparency because you're not ready to give them transparency, it's not like you're trying to hide something, but they're asking for documents or financials. I have one right now. The guy's asking for historical AR and AP reports. The guy can't give them to him because with the way they track AR and AP, when something gets paid or something gets brought in from the cash,
Mm-hmm.
they just delete it. It's just gone. That's their way of tracking it. And so, you know, so stuff like that, you're not ready for due diligence if you're doing that. So missing payroll reports, I've seen inconsistent margins, you know, and but with no explanation. You know, one year
Mm-hmm.
your cost of goods is 60%, and next year it's 30%, and you don't really have a reason. That's going to cause some issues down in due diligence. Treat due
It
diligence
is.
like it's a marketing campaign that you're going to do for your business. Get
Mm-hmm.
organized, get your documents together, come up with a solution for every question that you see on your own, label everything. Get ready for due diligence if you're thinking about listing your business.
You're absolutely right. And make sure it's digital too. Don't just handwrite stuff. Don't just take notes. It's going to need to be able to put into the data room and share quickly, whether Dropbox, our data room through our CRM. They're going to want T&L's tax returns imported in Excel format. They're going to want that availability to do that. Last thing I know a buyer wants to see is an owner-generated P&L on a random Excel file with nothing except their own personal notes, not even generated from QuickBooks or any other accounting software. It's going to make it very hard. It's going to limit your scope, as we talk about. None of this says it's a deal killer. Let's make that clear again. But it limits your scope and your scale you can to find a bigger buyer base. And buyers have gotten sophisticated. There's been a lot of people got burned years ago in due diligence because it was all done by hand and it was hard to go through every document by hand. You had to fax or literally snail mail everything. Now buyers are saying, why can't I get a P&L in 24 hours? Why can't you go to QuickBooks, click download, export? Or, hey, my accountant can put it in his software. Here's the direct encrypted link. That's where we're at. And as sellers, if you're not prepared for that, it's going to really limit your ability. And buyers should expect that. In the modern era, we have gotten to the point where everyone should be at least using some form of digital transfer of information. If you're not and you're not willing to do that, that's going to be a massive red flag. Let's just point that out right now. And if you don't have a bookkeeper, you don't have time as an owner, you need to hire one to at least get you caught up and prepped, right, Chris? At least get somewhat ready. Doesn't mean it has to be 24 hours always, but it should not be 3 months to get a P&L from request. That is absolutely absurd, and you and I have dealt with that a bunch, and it's cost those owners most of the time their deals, or at least severely hindered their ability to get a better price, because you and I know things can change in 3 months. Things can happen, and if you're taking your time getting to P&L, and that buyer's ready, he loses interest, then the P&L comes back, hand done, all messed up. You can see feet walking out the door that way, just gone. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. And I'll add this to due diligence. Closing attorneys. There are firms specializing just in small business acquisitions, just M&A work. They've always been there before, but now with the digital age, they're doing work across the country. They're getting firms to help them across the country. It is massively changing how these firms interact, and they're getting hyper-specialized. The documentation they're producing is getting hyper-specialized. Thus, it's getting to be In some areas, it's easier to go through because the boilerplate's getting more refined. The language you're going to most likely to see, the terms that you and I see all the time being presented. The problem is it's not always the right fit for the right deal. I've seen some firms bring $200 million contracts down for a $700,000 deal, and it's like, I know this is boilerplate for your firm, but this is not applicable to this business. It doesn't work. In the same token, we've seen some other firms work on flat rate now, not even charging hourly, just taking basic templates, sending them over and having the other side's firm. Maybe you don't even have a transaction attorney anymore. You have a buy side and a sell side attorney. It has changed a lot in the last 5 to 6 years because of, again, we're going to repeat this, the digital scale and AI's ability to help lawyers now read documents, respond quicker, analyze them. All of this is happening. And if you're not aware of it, you need to pull the curtain back from behind your eyes and look, because it is a very different world than what it was 5 years ago. And I keep saying that because I want to drive that point home. It is dramatically different. We knew this was going to happen when COVID forced people to work from home. It was going to change the mindset and people's habits. I didn't think it would move this quick into the industry, but with the younger buyer pool, having grown up in that era, now exposed to it, with AI moving as fast as it is, that none of us, I think, saw, respectfully, right, Chris? Unless you're on the inside, you would know, but it's a different world out there. I used to never see lawyers market on LinkedIn. I see lawyers market all the time on LinkedIn now for services. QOV firms are popping up left and right on LinkedIn. It's just a different game. And everybody wants to share their knowledge and share their experience. And it's for good thing, it's the rising tide has lifted all boats, but buyers and sellers. This is what this episode today is focusing some of that energy and knowledge to y'all is. It's good that it's happening, but if you don't want to get on board, you're going to be the anchor pulling your own boat down. And you're going to miss out on that lift, and it's going to hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say buyers, too, come in with almost sometimes too much information, and it hurts them. It hurts them from getting a deal.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah, it hurts them from getting a deal done because they want perfection.
Treating it like the wrong type of deal.
Yeah, they want perfection. They want that 24-hour P&L, and when they don't start getting all that stuff, it's not lining up. You see them walk away. Yeah, they walk away from the deal, and who knows if they were supposed to be the buyer or not. They took off the first sign of trouble or imperfection.
Any roadblock.
20 years ago, deals were probably done with handshakes and barely a signature, and they still worked out good. Not saying it's the way to do it, but there is a happy medium between that and this over-analyzing with Q of E and saying this income's not going to recur, so we're redacting that and are taking that out of the equation, and the multiples this and that. And, I get it. That's our job to actually understand valuations and understand
and work through that.
Yeah, and work through it. So when buyers are bringing these points up, to our sellers not defending themselves and saying, oh, well, I don't even know where to start with that argument. We do that for them. But buyers need to have some grace. You and I have looked at some deals, and yeah, we could have analyzed it to death. We could have analyzed ourselves out of it and never gotten anything done. But at some point, you got to take some blind faith. You got your information, but you got to understand what you can do as a business owner. If you're going to buy this business, what are you going to be able to do? Does it have to remain as perfect as the guy who's run it for 20 years? Or can you, I like your story there where the guy came in with new ideas and did elevate it. He didn't pay for it. He didn't pay for the business owner for what he was going to bring to the table, but he had idea of, hey, I can grow this business by 20% by just doing this, and so I think I think people looking at buying businesses, they need to take all that information that they've got, but they also need to kind of treat it in a reality, which is this guy's been running it for 20 years. And not everything's going to be perfect because business is not perfect.
It never is. No matter how good a company's run, there's always flaws and holes in it. I mean, I promise you, Amazon has problems. Let's be honest. Microsoft, Apple. Let's not kid ourselves. So does Joe's automotive shop down the street. One thing about buyers I want to point out to people listening and sellers too. There's a lot of buyers that expect to be treated like kings when they come in, and maybe it's part from not having owned your own business and had the experience of dealing with businesses like this. But just because you don't get exactly what you want doesn't mean you should be entitled to throw a fit. And I say this with grace here. It's not easy doing a transaction. And if you've never done one, it can be stressful. When you're leveraging your life savings, it's stressful. We understand you're taking a massive risk and you want to be treated, respectfully for that. Fully understand. But it doesn't give you the right to be a jerk. And I've had some cases with younger buyers where they just get bent out of shape over the smallest things. There's going to be hiccups. Like you said, you have to take a leap of faith. There are going to be things you can't perfectly protect yourself as a buyer. Let me make that clear out there, no matter what firm tells you. Get proper legal representation and proper clauses and clawbacks in your contracts, reps and warranties. But it doesn't mean you can make every deal foolproof. And that's what I think there's been a common, like you said, a misconception driven by over information stimulation to buyers in the marketplace. It's good to get the right business attorney who understands transactions. I agree 100% with that, Chris. And we stress that when we see people bring their mom and pop lawyer to the table, please don't do that. You need a business, a transaction attorney who understands the level of business you're dealing with, preferably with some industry experience if available. But if not, you're setting yourself up for failure too. At the same time, you can't ask that owner to give you a perfect slicing guarantee and warranty for 10 years down the road. That's absurd. No business owner can guarantee something like that. So when I see some of these issues popping up, I see that, one, hurt diligence and prevent close sometimes, but two, I see it worst into our next topic, post-close expectations. Well, I repped and warrant this, and I can't believe he sold me his business and the cooler broke the next day. Stuff happens, man. You think I know my light fixture in my house is going to burn out? Do you think I know when the light switch in my bathroom is going to give out by chance? Like, my HVAC's going to have a malfunction? It's 3 years old. You don't know that, and you can't expect someone just to rep and warranty everything. But the good ones do understand this post-close, Chris. They understand that this is also a marriage to some degree, and that your biggest success is, we're going to say our favorite word, Chris, transferability, post-close. How do you do that? Setting up proper training and transition requirements, and buyers understanding that the good ones know I need them, I want them, but I can't own them like a piece of the business. At the same time, you've got to set expectations early when you come in saying, if I don't have the industry experience or I need some help here, that you're going to stick around with me. And how do I properly compensate you for that? But also don't have you running my business for me and I'm taking all the profits out. Because I've seen some ridiculous offers where buyers are basically want the owner almost semi-run it for them. And the owner's like, why am I selling to you for you to keep the profits and me do all the work? You know, you have to know a balance between B2 consulting agreements and also to just, if you manage your emotions correctly going into this and set expectations, you'll be amazed how many owners are going to want to give everything for you, right, Chris? And want to really make sure you succeed and will do above and beyond. And sometimes without compensation just because they want you to do right. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. The word legacy comes to mind.
Great word.
Owners who have run these businesses for 10, 15, 20 years, they're very interested in that business continuing with their name, the business's name. The employees are probably like their family.
Mm-hmm.
And they do not want to see it fail. So I've had both ways. I've had sellers who want massive amounts of money for staying on board. I get those.
Which is not fair to buyers either. Let's make that very clear. It's not. And it doesn't make sense for deal structure.
No, and I tried to set expectations, and I showed the math of like, hey, you take the $500,000 cash flow that you're making now, they're going to be taking over. $250,000, $300,000 of that's going to be debt service. You're wanting $150,000 if you're going to work for another 12 months.
Who wants to do that deal now?
Yeah. So I usually,
you wouldn't do that deal, Mr. Seller. You wouldn't do that deal.
Yeah. Usually if I get a client like that, I was like, well, let's set this up so you're more of a consultant and they'll call you when they need you after 30 days or something of that nature. That way they're still around. Buyers they're not just paying for assets. They're paying for continuity. They expect training. They expect introductions. They want support during the transition. So as a seller, you need to kind of think about that early. I tell my sellers to define their transition role in the LOI. Mm-hmm. Make sure it's set up in the LOI. That way we don't get through this period. We get through due diligence. And now for the first time when we're drafting purchase agreements and employment agreements, if there's going to be one, it's not the first time both sides have understood each other as far as what the seller's willing to do, what the buyer wants. Put that in the LOI. Clears up so much confusion.
You're exactly correct. And I think a new growing point that we see a lot more is in the LOIs and APAs is more guarantees on data transferability. I said that a bunch of times already today, but hey, understanding what accounting software is in play, which accountants involved, how am I going to get your data into my system or to another strategic buyer system or however to access it so that I know when I get in, I'm not missing one single ounce of proprietary information or knowledge that I need to be successful. And I think often owners look at that, like you said, oh, it's like, yes, it's work, but you don't understand. If someone's leveraging $2, $3, $4, $5 million, even $100,000, that's all they have. They need to know what they're grabbing is real, that they can touch it, they can feel it, that even if it's intangible items, that it's there. And if you don't have that prepared and lined up, it's just going to hurt your chances. Again, we're always telling you, none of these are absolute deal killers, absolute guarantees, but when you roll them all up, you get a better product and a better deal. And in deal making, all sides are happy or content or feel like they got what they needed, typically deals tend to survive, get over the hurdles, and move on. It means conceding on some issues, but also means giving and getting on others. And it's amazing and that's the one issue with young buyers I think have never dealt a lot in. That's where I think they struggle a little bit emotionally, but also mathematically, because they've been told, go buy these businesses. They're not unoptimized and they're great. And it sets also those set a bad narrative in their brain. They're coming in thinking this business is going to be terrible. I got to do all this. Like, you really don't. Look how it's done on its own all these years. It doesn't mean there aren't room for potential and growth, as we've said, in post-close, adding new systems. But I would tell you as a buyer looking at it and as a seller too, young buyers, until you know the business, don't make changes. Come in and learn and figure out. You may have a plan, and it's good to have a plan during diligence to find things you think, hey, I can improve X, Y, Z, I think, or I can do this. But figure it out first before you implement. Too often people want to come in and implement before they've done the due diligence. But because you've done due diligence before you buy the business, you've got post-close diligence. When you're having to do it on the fly and it's all your responsibility. You can't just lean on tell the owner, you've got to figure it out and do it yourself. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not emotionally mature enough to buy a business. It's true. So that is also a hard part for a lot of the changes post-close. People want guarantees. Again, I said it in reps and warranties. The owner can only give you so much. End of the day, when they hand you those keys, you've got to be the driver. You've got to lead. And you need to be prepared to lead. And if you're not prepared to lead, you can't read the P&L or you can't read the balance sheet, you don't need to get in the car yet. Take a step back, get ready, come back to market when you are. Because you're only going to hurt yourself. Doesn't mean you can't learn on the fly some things. We all do that in our jobs. But there's a different level of what you should be ready to walk into. And if you're not, and you're not emotionally ready, and you want all that in writing in an offer LOI, the owner's going to say, I'm not doing all that. That's absurd. If you're not ready to take the plunge or you can't do it, why are you at the table, right, Chris? I see LOIs all the time that are either over demanding or completely, barren, scrape one-pagers. Good buyers have learned to come in with more structured LOIs and more structured documentation up front, like you said, setting expectations to get to diligence, to get deal structure in place, to get to post-close, include working capital. We could go down the list we've talked about. Having all that structured prepared is important. And you'd be surprised as a seller, you should want to see that. That means someone has done their homework. They've thought about it. They've thought through the whole process. They're not just saying, I like your company, here's the money. It's how is this going to strategically fit? And when they've done that, that's probably a sign of a good buyer, and you need to make it work, or at least do your dangest to find the right concessions and agreements, both back and forth between you both, to get there. So let's be honest. Today, buyers are more informed.
Yeah, my key takeaway from today is for sellers thinking about selling their business, understanding this: buyers want predictability. That's kind of summarizes what we're talking about today. The best advice I can give any owner thinking about selling is start thinking like a buyer. That's hard to do. It really is hard to do because you're encased in what you see every day and running a business. But think like a buyer before you ever even meet one. A buyer-ready business isn't about being perfect. That's not what I'm saying. You don't have to make your business perfect. But I'm going to use that word again. You need to make it predictable. Those clean financials, transferable operations, prepared documentation, that's what drives value. When a buyer walks through your door and you've got all that ready, they're going to be willing to pay a lot more than something they don't quite understand. They've got to get their head wrapped around it. They got to get your financials figured out. Their Q of E teams even got to make up new financials because you don't have that AR or historical AP
Talk
reports.
about disaster when that happens.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen countless sellers who thought they needed to grow revenue before they go to sell. I've got some now who that's their thought process is we need to just...
it's margins. It's margins and documentation.
I've got this guy in Mississippi. He's doing so well, and he's in one of the trades that we talked about. He could be killing it right now on a value. He could do an equity rollover because he's in his mid-50s, but he's just thinking that he needs to go from 5 million to 10 million or something like that. And maybe I get it. I get that thought process. I'm not saying you're not wrong, but he's ready to sell is the problem, but he's thinking that he just wants to grow revenue. If you're transferable and you're predictable and all your stuff is lined up, I can go find you a buyer that will do an equity rollover. You can keep 20-25% of your business, and you can watch what these private equity groups do to your business to grow it 5 times, 10 times bigger than you ever thought possible, because they're a national, they've got, 100
they're
businesses
capitalized.
under their belt. Yeah, they're capitalized. They can grow it however they want.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're thinking that you need to grow revenue before you sell, if you're a pretty good sized business, you don't. You just need to make sure everything's lined up, make sure you're predictable, make sure everything looks good to a buyer. Think like a buyer.
You're right. And I'll add to that. Think about your margins. Revenue is great, but if you can't convert it to profit, or you can't sustain it because you're doing things that are, not traditional or ways to support what you've grown, that's not going to matter when the buyer comes in and realizes, yeah, you brought in the salesman, did all the work, salesman's gone. Are you going to hold on to the business? Or is this just a one-time bump that's going to go back down? Sales are not everything. And yes, revenue is important. You need revenue to make profit. Let's not be silly. Everything starts with what you bring in. But you made a great point. Predictability, transferability. If all that's there, the margin's there, I will see people pay more for the margin knowing the business is run great than they will just for pure revenue. They will, because it's predictability and defined success on paper that can be transferable. And I know we say these words a lot in the podcast, so if you're listening, take the hint. We're saying it because that's how we do our job. We put our shoes, often we first get the business, our job is to put our shoes in the shoes of the buyer and look at it through that fine-tooth comb. Once we've done that, then we can sit in the mindset of the seller and say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's how a buyer's going to come in. Here's how you need to come at it. And here's the happy marriage. And that's what we're bringing to the table for you all today who are listening, how to get to that part. But you said it best, Chris. If you're starting to think about selling, think like a buyer. Or if you have questions, you can call Chris and I. Let's get ourselves in the right mindset of what to look for and prepare for. Because my dad always told me, if you want to find profit, start reverse engineer what's going on. How do you get from a sale and work your way backward? And you start realizing things differently. Because often owners look at, hey, I got to go out there and get that new customer. Think backwards. What is that new customer going to bring to you? Think a little backwards. That's how a buyer's going to look at your business. They're going to look at the bottom. Every buyer does this, whether they like it or not. They get the P&L and where their eyes go, Chris, straight to the bottom to what number?
Net income.
Because you do add backs like depreciation and amortization and interest and all that. So often good buyers know that the EBITDA or the SDE number is not going to be the actual net profit. Doesn't mean net profit is everything, but the net profit 0 and the EBITDA is 500, they're going to go, ugh. They're immediately going to go, okay, this guy isn't really making margins. He's just living out of the business, right? Whereas I saw one the other day, the gross revenue was around $2 million. The net profit said $1 million. When a buyer sees that and realizes that's not a fluffed up add back SDE number, I'm going to see LOIs be slapped on my face. Literally, like it does matter. Margin matters. And I stress that where it shows up on paper, not just in an add back. When that's there, it's a game changer. And buyers are looking more and more for that because if buyers have done research for a while now looking to buy a business in the current market, we've talked about the bad business ads out there. We've talked about the fake franchises scam. We've talked about bad business being presented by other groups. If the SDE and the numbers don't match up what has to be presented to bring someone in, you're going to lose them too. So having proper documentation to justify that SDE and that EBITDA number to show that it's not just a bunch of fluff add back or a bunch of fluff in there, more likely to get your deal done too and financed. And that will also help you get a better price. That was a good little episode, huh, Chris? I think we covered a lot today.
Yeah, hopefully there's some good information for buyers and sellers.
And that's right. And if you had any questions about what we spoke about today, Chris and I are happy to take phone calls and explain it. You're happy to reach out to us. We'd love to address any questions or comments you have for the podcast. We do get some feedback from time to time from people saying, hey, I like this or didn't understand this concept. Can you elaborate more? We'll be sure to include that on the future episodes and dive a little bit deeper and make sure that those of you listening do understand exactly what we're talking about. Or if you don't know, we'd love to talk to you and help you understand. Our goal is to educate and help you, as we always say in the podcast. And we appreciate all of you who do listen, subscribe. And for the record, numbers are going up, viewership is going up, so we love y'all and appreciate you out there. I'm Brandon Bourgeois. That is Christopher Sater. Till the next time, this is the Sepsis Told Podcast. We will see you next week with a fresh and new topic. Y'all stay tuned in.